If you were here last week, we started off a series on the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth, the story of Ruth, is a story of Naomi and Ruth. And if you know that story, you know it's a heart-wrenching story. You'll know that it's a story that as you read it, you realize God is not a God distant and far off, judging. He is a God who entered into what he saw as a very broken world and loved and lived amongst these people to redeem and to save. And you'll see that someone like Naomi, so if you know the story of Naomi, Naomi lost her husband. Naomi lost her 2 sons. And what she's left with in a day where you needed men to farm, she lost her future. She lost safety. She lost her dreams. She didn't know what life would look like. And so it's even in this situation, she tells Orpah and Ruth, her 2 daughters-in-law, go stay in Moab while I go back home. And what she's then at that point doing is saying, I may not have a future and a life, but I want you to have a future and a life. So don't go with me and the cursed life that I live, but stay back in Moab. But Ruth decides to stay. And she says, wherever you will go, I will go. Wherever you will live, I will live. Wherever you will die, I will die there. I will live there even after you die there because I'm committed to you, Mom. And that's a picture of love, not just marital love, romantic love. It's a picture of real love. When you love well, you innately want to stay there committed. So even if it's a friend, you want to keep that relationship, whatever it would be. Even if you have a strained relationship with your parents, you want to keep that relationship because you know love entails commitment. The book of Ruth is one of the 2 books named after a woman. So it kind of gives you insight into how special this book is. And it's the only book in the Old Testament named after a non-Jew. So if you thought the God of the Old Testament was a God that's only for Israel, no, it was never just for Israel. It was to bless Israel, to bless the nations. Just like us, God blesses us so that we would bless the nations. We're no more special than everyone else, but we're blessed to be a blessing for everyone else. And that's why this book is so special. And today we'll talk specifically about faith and love. In suffering, what does faith look like? In suffering, what does love look like? And the first thing that we're going to look at is that faith in the real life, it weeps. Faith weeps. Tell your neighbor, faith weeps. Faith weeps. Ruth 1, verse 19 says this. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. So this is now Ruth and Naomi, and they have made that journey back home to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town, being a small town, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi? She looks different. She left a while back with a husband, I thought. Is he not around?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, husband, a future. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" She goes back home. She goes back home, and Bethlehem was set up like any other city in the day with a wall and with a city gate for protection. So she goes back to the very city gates that she left. I could imagine her being young, newly married, looking for a future, some food, some security. She leaves home, leaving those gates. And I imagine that she would look back upon that journey thinking she's leaving home. For many of you, you've left home. You probably remember the day you moved to Korea, and you remember that moment of going into the airport, going in through security, going onto the airplane. It's a big deal. And for her, as she walks away, she looks back. And so as she now comes back years later, going through the very same city gates, probably recognizing, as people recognize her, probably recognizing those that she left. And then she sees the people gathering, right? She sees the people talking. Oh, is this Naomi? She looks different. She looks aged. Where's her husband? And so she makes a statement to her friends. And her statement is this: don't call me Naomi. What does Naomi mean? Pleasant. Don't call me pleasant. Don't call my life pleasant. She says, no, I have a new name. My name is Mara. It means bitter. Bitter. My name is Mara. My life is bitter. All I taste is bitterness. That's all that's in my heart. And she claims, this is her testimony, she went away full and came back empty. And she's real. She's authentic. She doesn't go away full and through hardship says, oh no, I'm still good, I'm still full. No, she's very honest with her situation. It's empty. I'm bitter. I've got nothing. And that's her testimony. Her testimony, she believes. I want you to hear this. She believes that God is against her. She believes that because of a sin that she has committed, perhaps, that there's no hope for the future. Her life is cursed. And what you will find in the story of Naomi's life, through the book of Ruth, what you will find is that she was mistaken. God was never against her. She thought she was, and man, sure does it feel like it, right? When you suffer, it feels like it, right? It feels like God is not good. God is out to get me. Something that I did, He is now bringing justice into my life. And that's how she feels. And reading it, and you may have friends, as they suffer, they start to complain. Well, why is God like this? And you start to see them complain. You start to see them, show bitterness. And what you want to do is correct them, right? No, you're wrong. We should correct Naomi, right? That's a godly, biblical thing to do, right? We should correct Naomi. Nowhere in the book of Ruth does anyone ever correct her. And I want you to see that. It's not like, as she says to the world, I was once pleasant, I had a pleasant life, and now I'm bitter. God is now against me. You don't see Ruth saying like, oh, Mom, no, you can't say that, right? You don't see that. You don't see other people trying to correct her. Why? Because they see the pain. You see, faith weeps. Your faith journey, there'll be moments where you weep. There'll be moments when you just don't get it. Nothing adds up. And that's real faith. You see, Sunday school faith, Naomi's Sunday school faith was not ready for the suffering and the burdens and the challenges of real life. And if you grew up in church, your faith will be tested, where at points you will really genuinely question, and you may feel bad about it, but you'll genuinely question, is this right? Is God real? Is Christianity the right thing? Am I mistaken? Is God out to get me? No one corrects her in her brokenness, because faith weeps, because real Christian life is messy. Real Christian life is very, very messy. I've counseled a lot of people in the past 10 years of ministry. I've counseled a lot, met up with a lot of people, a lot of brokenness. And I found that in general, there's two types of people. It's what I would call hyper-present people and hypo-present people. Hyper-present people meaning they're so in the moment, they're so in the now. All they think and feel is what's real to them. And they're so in the moment, so often they can't see into the future that they end up becoming cynical and jaded by their experience. So they're hyper-present, they're too present, they can't see beyond. They don't have hope for tomorrow. They have no idea how that situation will turn out a year later, a decade later. They can't see that. They're hyper-present. And then there's the other who are hypo-present, meaning they're not present at all. They're so into the future. And so often, when you know people like this, they seem like they're out of touch with reality. They always kind of say Christian jargon. Oh, it's going to be okay. God is good. And you know they're suffering. You can tell by their mannerisms. but they don't acknowledge it. It's not real. It's what I would call Ned Flanders Christianity. It's what I would call Oakley-dokley Christianity. Oakley-dokley, everything is okay, no problem, God is good, it's going to be all right. Not acknowledging in that time, they should be weeping. It's okay to be broken. It's okay to suffer because it is a broken world, and that's why God had to come. And even now, as we walk with God in our faith, it's not that everything is magic. Everything is Disney World. It's not. It's still broken. God has redeemed, is redeeming, but not has yet fully redeemed, and that's our lives. And you see people who are hypo-present, meaning not present today, often their faith looks plastic. It's plastic faith is what I will call it. It's plastic faith. Everything is put together nice. Everything is always shiny. They always look okay. They always have the right response. It's plastic Christianity. It's artificial. It's not real. It's not organic. There's plastic Christianity and what I would call organic, real-life Christianity. There's scars. There's bruises. There's pain. There's at times you know God is real because that's what you were taught. That's what Scripture says. That's what Jesus lived. But yet in your heart of hearts, you feel like, man, is He really? Is God really present? Is He really loving? And that's a messy faith. The reality is this. No one here will ever escape sin and suffering. Okay? You will not walk through this earth unscathed. Okay? Tell your neighbor they will suffer. They will, right? If your neighbor's like, oh, I didn't realize that. They were probably born yesterday, right? Because you go through elementary school. There's suffering there, right? My 2-year-old boys, they torture each other, right? They inflict suffering on each other. You can't escape the today. You can't escape the sufferings of today. But the reality is as Christians, there's always hope for tomorrow. There's suffering for today, but there's always hope for tomorrow. And we as Christians, we're called to live in the messy middle. It's this messy middle. You feel like Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. At one point, you're trying to fight this idea of wanting something, but then you go back and forth. And that's kind of what it looks like. And I'm sure you're like that. You go to church, you get inspired by the people, the sermon, the worship, and you're going to live for Jesus. You go home and you screw up. You get angry at your parents or whatever it is, and you're like, what is wrong with me? And I'll say, you are a normal Christian. Or you are a very normal Christian, because there's suffering of today, but the hope of tomorrow. And we as Christians were called to live in that messy middle. And so if you grew up in the church, especially if you grew up in the church, and you feel like this is what it looks like to be a Christian, it's not. That's plastic. It's not real. Authentic Christianity, it's dirty. You get mud on you. You fall down. You have scars. In heaven, there will be men and women, if you can see into their hearts, full of scars, but washed by the blood of Christ, taken care of by who God is. That's what it looks like. Christians are called to live in the messy middle, the sufferings of today and the hope of tomorrow. So I want to give you some very practical steps with this, right? I want to give you, because I don't want to just be theoretical today. I want to help you understand when you go through this, what do you do? How do you actually go through life? How do you actually, what the Bible would call lament well? How do you lament? How do you suffer and bring it to God? How do you lament well? 2 points. How do you lament? Bring your heart to God. Not bring your good attitudes, not bring your optimism. No, as you are, your struggles, your doubts, everything you are, you bring that to God. If you look at the Psalms, it's very faith-filled, right? It's very filled with men and women who are believers of Yahweh, believers of the Lord. And so it's faith-filled. But you just read 2 more Psalms, and you realize they're not just faith-filled, they're very honest. They pour out their hearts. You read the Psalms, and you're like, oh, should they say this? Did someone actually accidentally include this? Is it mis? Or that's what it looks like, right? The Psalms are very honest. You bring your heart to God. And it's important that we do so because as you do, that's a sign of faith. Whatever you're going through, whatever doubts, anger that you go through, you have to bring that to God because that's actually a sign of faith. What do I mean? Senior year high school, I was very, very angry with God. My testimony, my life story of God is, I don't actually remember a day where I didn't know Jesus. There's times when I was in elementary school and I genuinely believed Him. I wanted to live for Him. I wanted to know Him. I wanted to please Him. And so for me, that's my story. I don't know a day, but my faith grew and all these things. At the end of high school, I was very angry at God. I lived very far away from my church. I lived about an hour away. And there was literally not one Christian I knew in high school. Not one Christian. And I don't know, because I was pretty public about my faith, but there was not one Christian that I knew. And so they would do all these things. They would invite me out on a Friday night, and I knew if I went there, I would do something that I would regret. So I chose not to, and that was my life. And all my Christian friends were an hour away. And so literally throughout the week, I was so lonely. And as soon as I got my license, I was at church like literally all weekend. That's how I partied, right? And so senior year, I was feeling very alone. And I started to just wonder, God, if you're real, why do I live an hour away from any friends? And you know, in high school, when you're alone, it's like the end of the world, right? There's nothing that's gonna happen with your life. And so I was angry. And so on a Friday night, after I'd gone to church and we hung out, went to Taco Bell, all that fun stuff, and driving home, I was just angry. Because my friends had Christian friends, and I felt like, where is God? If you're real, why am I so alone? And then just started, like literally, I had my fist, I was driving on the interstate, just yelling at God, God, what? Right? And I said, you don't exist. I said, you don't exist. You don't exist. And as I'm saying that, I'm saying, who am I talking to, right? I'm saying, God, you don't exist, but who am I talking to? I'm like, and I realize I do believe He exists. And I knew in my heart that He's real. And I knew He was good. But that moment didn't feel that. Why isn't it so important for us to share whatever we're going through to God? Because it's a sign of faith. Your anger towards Him says you believe in Him. Your anger towards Him says you believe He is good, but you don't sense it now. So you don't just pretend like, okay, God, it's all good then. No. You tell God, God, this is how I feel. I feel like my life is going to end. And you say it. Because the Bible is full of men and women who do that. The Psalm even teaches us to do that. You bring your heart to God. To bring negative emotions to God may not seem like the right thing to do. To not bring negative emotions to God may seem like the right thing to do, but you're only keeping God out of your heart. Do you see that? When you don't bring this stuff to God, and you feel like, well, I'm sinning, this is not the right thing, I'm too angry, what you're actually doing is saying, God, let me take care of it right now, give me some time, and when I'm all good, that's when I'll go to you. That's what that's saying. No, but God, what does He do? He came because we were broken. He's not shocked when you go through something difficult and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. I shouldn't have saved you. You're too messy. No, that's not God. He enters into your world because you are broken. So when you bring all of that to Him, what He is saying is, that's right, my child, come. Child, come. Yes, all you need is me. And one day you will fully understand that. Bring your heart to God. Good and bad, you bring your heart to God. 2, then you live your life for God. Then you live your life for God. In these verses, you see that Naomi, what's she doing? She's coming back home. And so what you see is out of her mouth, she has her fist clenched towards God and say, God is against me. That's what she's saying. But in her life, she's living. She still trusts. She's still walking with Ruth. You bring your heart to God, all of that it is, all the lack of faith, doubt, anger, all that stuff, you bring it to God, but then you still live your life. That's what lamenting looks like in Scripture. You say everything, but you still live by faith and not by emotion. It's when you start to not live for God. It's when you start to, when your life actually starts to look like regularly, obviously it will fall. Obviously you will make mistakes. But when that becomes your life pattern, that's when you have lost faith. That's when you can tell that, yes, this is what's in my heart, but I know what faith is. When you actually live a life of disobedience, you say, I don't believe, and now my life will start to show that. That's what it is. Biblical lamenting. You bring your heart to God and you live your life for God. C.S. Lewis wrote a pretty well-known book called The Screw Tape. And it's basically a fictional story of the master demon, the master Satan and his little minions of demons. And it's written from that perspective. And as Satan is trying to get his minions, his demons, to kind of mess up the faith of Christians, he brings suffering into their lives. And then this is what C.S. Lewis writes in terms of when they find a true Christian, this is what they end up looking like. This is the essence of faith. When there's no longer desire, looks around and sees no trace of God, and feels forsaken, but still obeys, this is faith. See, that's the essence of faith. When there's no desire, when they look around, they see no trace of God, they feel forsaken, but yet they still obey, that's faith. And in it, they say, with those kinds of Christians, you can't do anything with. You can mess up their lives completely, but you can't mess up their faith, because that's faith. That's what faith looks like. It's messy. The sorrows of today are real, but the hope of tomorrow is also very real. Faith weeps, but love weeps too. We see that in this, as Naomi, her faith is breaking, and she's weeping. You see Ruth cling on to her. And so as her faith is weeping, it's broken, you see Ruth loving. And as she loves, her love starts to weep. Faith will weep. Your faith will be broken, but your love will weep too. You live in that messy middle. That's what it looks like. You see, by nature, the definition of when you love, you suffer. Do you know that? When you choose to love somebody, you're always welcoming pain into your life. C.S. Lewis says it like this. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Right? That's true. All pet lovers here, right? Right? You think, oh, well, this cat will never break my heart. This dog will never break my heart. But what happens? Your heart's broken by an animal. That's what love looks like. Anything that you love at one point will break your heart because of distrust or whatever it is, or the person passes away. And so when you love, you're welcoming suffering into your life. Love weeps. Faith will leap here in this broken world, but love will weep also here in this broken world. And so as we close, I want to give you another practical steps on how to love well. Because if you're anything like I was maybe 10 years ago, when someone was suffering, I didn't want to get near it. You know, I didn't know what to say. When I went to a funeral, I felt like I should just look the part of mourning. But I didn't feel the pain. For many of you who haven't suffered much in life, you will struggle with it. But don't worry, your suffering will come. But when you suffer, that's when your heart starts to break from the plastic that it is, and it becomes flesh. It has heartbeat. Only suffering will do that. And so as you see people suffer, I don't want people at our church standing at a distance. Oh, I don't know what to say. I don't want you to be fearful. I don't want you to be driven by fear of hurting or disappointing. I want you to be men and women who courageously enter into their pain, their desert, and love well. And so 6 simple points. How do you love someone that's hurting? 1, you weep with them. the most basic principle. You get this down, I think you'll be okay. So does it mean literally weeping? Sometimes you may be moved. Other times, you sit there and just let the person weep. And let them know it's okay for that person to weep. You sit in sorrow with them. You weep with them too. Then you listen to them. You listen to them. You hear everything that they have to say. And you want to be a safe person where they don't have to feel like they have to say the right thing. If you're a guy, tendency is you're not going to try to love them. You are trying to love them, but you want to fix them. Okay? There's a very big difference between loving somebody and fixing somebody. When someone's hurting, don't fix them. Love them. Listen to them. Let them share everything. If they start saying all these things that you feel like are blasphemous, you just keep that face sad and let them express, because that's how they feel, and their feelings are authentic. You weep with them, you listen to them, then you serve them also. Some of you are very good at this, others of you are not so much. Often you're thinking, how do I sit with them and hear them? But when suffering comes into their life, they need help. They need help with food, taking care of dinner for family, money. So look for ways in which you could drop off a small gift. When they come to church, just make sure you sit with them. Something very simple like that so they don't feel alone. Help with house chores. Cook for them. Buy them a book. Download worship music for them. Whatever it would look like, serve them. So weep, listen, serve, for wait. Be patient. It'll take time. Just wait. If you feel like, well, it's been 2 days now, wait 3 days, a week, a month. Let them know you love them. Weep, listen, serve, wait, share when asked. This is the only bullet point that has a little bit more. Because I need to tell you, you share when asked. When you go to a funeral, yes, that person may be in a better place. But honestly, that's not what they want to hear. All they want to hear is, hey, we love you. We're here for you. I'm so sorry. That's what you say. Share when asked. If you build that trust, they will ask. Is what I'm saying, is it wrong? Do you think, what do you think happened with my mom, with my dad? They'll give you that opportunity if you build the sense that you genuinely love them. Share when asked. With Job's friends, they say that they did everything right until they spoke. Think about it, right? They did everything right until they spoke. As soon as they spoke, it went downhill. Because they wanted to preach, oh, Job, what you're saying is wrong. Job, that's not right. Oh, that's not what it's to be like to be a good, Yahweh believer. Share when asked. And then sixth day. Though the event passes in your life, that event will never pass in their life. Some memorials. Be good about that. Write it down in your calendar. Remember that person. Stay with them. Follow up with these people who hurt and suffer 3 months later, 6. Put it in your calendar because you may forget. But in doing so, you want to stay with them as they suffer. I'm going to read a poem as I close. And many of you know this poem. This poem is hung in bathrooms all over the world. It's a poem of footprints. One night I dreamed I was walking along the beach with the Lord. Many scenes from my life flashed across the sky. In each scene, I noticed footprints in the sand. Sometimes there were 2 sets of footprints. Other times, there was only 1. This bothered me because I noticed that during the low periods of my life, when I was suffering from anguish, sorrow, and defeat, I could only see 1 set of footprints. So I said to the Lord, you promised me, Lord, that if I followed you, you would walk with me always. But I have noticed that during the most trying periods of my life, there has only been 1 set of footprints in the sand. Why? When I needed you most, have you not been there for me? The Lord replied, the years that you have seen only one set of footprints, my child, is when I carried you. That's the reality. I believe when we see God face to face, we may not even get the answers done, but you will see in hindsight those moments and those nights that you felt so alone, God was with you, and God has loved you. And that's the gospel. It is God who entered into this broken world so that you would never be alone. Jesus, the Son, in that moment on the cross when all sin was put upon him, for the first time in his prayers, he doesn't say, Father, he says, Lord, Lord, why have you forsaken me? It's the first time there's separation. You see, Christ entered into this world, took upon our sin, the wrath of God, the suffering, so that we would never be alone. And so if you believe in him, in the quietness of your own room, when you weep and you feel like no one understands, God is the one that understands you because he understands all suffering, because he is the one that has truly suffered innocently. And that's the gospel. Don't clean yourself up before you come. Come as you are, broken, and he will fix you up. He will restore you and heal you. Let's pray.